Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and today we'll be talking about James Herriot's The Lord God Made Them All, which is one of many collections of stories, collecting incidents, things, stuff that James Herriot wrote. For those who don't know, James Herriot is the pseudonym of a originally Glaswegian but wound up in the Yorkshire Dales practicing um, as a vet on farms out that way. He fought in World War II as a pilot in the RAF and then returned to Yorkshire afterwards. Um, and this particular book was published in 1981 the first time. Um, the edition that you're looking at the cover of basically declares that this was first published by Michael Joseph Ltd. That edition that you're looking at the cover of was published in 1982. However, that's not my copy. That is a friend's copy because my copy has a cover that is brown cloth with nothing on it. It is literally just like cloth. So I took her up on her offer and used this particular cover. The information about the artist on the cover I will put in the description below because apparently he is a cartoonist who is known somewheres in places. I don't know him, but that's just me. Uh, the thing about James Herriot that is so remarkable is his books are genuinely all ages books. These are books that are entertaining to small children, they're entertaining to kids, they're entertaining to teenagers, they're entertaining to adults, they're entertaining to the elderly, who we all know are not adults, but the elderly and a separate thing. If anyone older than however old I am, which I am not telling you, happens to be listening to this, feel free to crawl through your computer and throttle me. So, these books are stories about his life. These are mostly humorous, and they're just autobiographical. It's a pseudonym with names and place names all changed to protect the innocent. But these are all just stories. They're stories about the time that he had a student, and that student was telling him all about the brand new ability to do cesarean sections on cattle and various other farm animals. And so he kind of just went for it excitedly when they had an opportunity to try it, and the student was forced to admit that he'd seen it a few times from the back of an operating theater and didn't really know what was going on. You have stories from earlier in his days of practice when he was living and working with Siegfried Farnan, who was his mentor initially. Tristan, you see here, Coco, goat droppings for Tristan. That's a story about how Tristan won the day and got the regard of a woman who showed her regard in goat droppings. So they're very, very humorous. This book is incidents, random incidences and occurrences in the course of the life of a country vet in Yorkshire, but it's cut through with some longer linked together stories. The stories of two times that he, at the suggestion and behest of a friend, took on a job as a vet to going along with animals being transported the first time to Russia, the second time to Istanbul, and he just told stories about these adventures and misadventures, and those were very, very funny. This one with artificial insemination notes and the very, very sketchy picture of cows. Oh, by the way, if anyone's wondering, I have no idea who the artist is on these. because all the cover page says here is drawings by Larry. So, Larry, whoever you are, I like your drawings. I don't know who you are. I assume you're from England somewhere, or Britain somewhere. No idea who Larry is. This is a delightful story of the time he had to get a semen sample from a bull, and that was a very, very exciting event in terms of the bull taking great exception to somebody grabbing his member and attempting to guide it into the plastic fake vagina, and then Tristan showing up and trying to help, and it's really just hilarious, these books. The big thing is, these are one of the great keynotes of these books is that these are stories about real people and real events, and they have that real quality of those stories that you tell at parties. Your favorite stories about the cow who barely survived childhood illness and grew up to have a twitch that made her look like she was giving people come thither eyes. This is, of course, a picture of that cow. Bramble was her name. And what makes this book so good is that the humor is gentle. There's nothing sharp, there's nothing sarcastic, there's nothing quote-unquote adult in this. These are just funny stories. But these stories are also sometimes less funny. Some of these stories can be really, really just heartbreaking. Tear-jerkers, heart-wrenching. There are several stories in here, several moments. What James Herriot has is an absolute marvelous skill at, among other things, giving us these final stories, these final lines that take something and take something that was light and humorous and entertaining and just make it so poignant. Chapter 6, he talks about a bunch of POWs that had been packed off to the Yorkshire Dales to basically serve out their sentences, to basically be there and to help on farms. And he starts with the funny incident of one man who dressed up a Mongolian in his wife's dressing gown in order to give his wife a fright, and it was a hilarious practical joke. And Luigi, who managed to bring a raging bull to bay by just grabbing its ear and managing to order it into submission. And Herriot talks about how 30 years later, Siegfried and I still talk about him. We have both tried to catch large cattle by the ears without the slightest success. So was Luigi just an amateur with wrists of steel, or was he a farmer, and do they do it that way in Italy after a lifetime of practice? We still don't know. And it's really, really funny. And then all of a sudden, the final section of it, he talks about driving home one summer evening, and he hears a chorus of voices singing in Russian. It's Russian prisoners, and it's not just a bunch of guys singing together. That he calls it a vast drilled choir up there, deep voices blending in thrilling harmonies which hung and lingered in the soft air. I sat entranced for a long time till the light faded and the chill of nightfall made me close my window and drive away. Years later, I read that these Russians went home to death or captivity, and whenever I thought of their fate, I remembered that summer evening and the beautiful music they made in the peace of the Yorkshire hills. And with that, he takes this story, this collection of random funny incidents, and it makes me cry every time, because it brings it this sense of harsh realism and just absolutely poignant beauty as you're there with him suddenly, as you're there imagining a beautiful all-male choir, and then the realization that all of these men went home to Soviet Russia, they went home to the USSR, and that so many of them went home to death, that they went home to camps, to being stripped away from their homes again and being sent to Siberia, to being executed for nothing. And the saddest story in this book, and I'm telling you this because probably you should be warned, is chapter 15 about Amber the dog, who gets an incurable case of mange, and by the end of it, Herriot has tried so hard to cure her with no success. And he gets to the point where one day he just sees her in the headlights of his car and he realizes that she can't go on and he can't go on and he has to put her down, and she is the sweetest and most good-natured dog he'd ever seen, and she had been so beautiful, and he looks at her and remembers that the condition had spread over the entire body, leaving only tufts and straggling wisps of hair. The long ears were golden no longer. They were almost bald, as was the rest of her face and head. Everywhere her skin was thickened and wrinkled, and it assumed a bluish tinge. And Amber, despite her terrible state, her nature was unchanged. And you get to the end of this story and you cry. You cry as he talks about dogs that he sees in Darrowby who've survived this particular kind of mange. And when he sees them in the streets, healthy and glossy coated, the picture of Amber comes back into my mind. It is always dark, and she is always in the headlights beam. And if you're wondering, I'm crying right now because that story makes me cry. And that's what these books bring. They give you laughter, and they give you tears, and they give you just a day in the life of somebody who sees humor and tragedy and knows just the right way to put it. This is a book that I cannot speak too highly of, in my opinion. And I love his books. I love reading them. I love the way that you'll be laughing along with something and then all of a sudden just get hit with something get hit with these moments that are so undeniably sad. And so that's why I love them, is because they run the gamut and because they're not trying hard. He's not trying to be one thing or another. He's just being autobiographical. And if nothing else, these make great gifts for kids, for young readers, because these are books that you carry forward, that you take with you, that you come back to. And so I can only say that I find it hard to imagine somebody who won't like them. Somebody won't, but I would hope nobody who's listening to me. Thanks all for coming, and I hope to see you next week.